Hi there, thank you so much for joining me today. This video is a palette wish list video where I'll be talking about all of my favorite palettes that I really want to buy right now, and most of them I probably will buy at some point. I'm doing this in collaboration with my friend Bilddal. I originally found her through her Pan Those Eyeshadows videos, and then we ended up becoming friends on Instagram, and we got to talking and thought it would be fun to do a video together, so we're doing our own palette wish list. She'll be talking about 10 or so palettes that she wants to get to. She's really funny and she has this gorgeous long hair, and I've really been liking her videos. I think she recently had a video go viral on TikTok, which is pretty exciting. Not that I know anything about TikTok, but she also does a lot of really interesting eyeshadow color combos. I'll put one right here where she did like a teal and orange combo. It looks so pretty. And yeah, she'll be talking about some palettes that are on her wish list over on her channel. So please be sure to go check her out and tell her I said hello. Without further ado, let's get started. I have, I think, 10 or 11 palettes to talk about. The first one I just saw on Instagram and on YouTube this morning, and that is a collaboration that Shroud Cosmetics is doing with Bean, who is a YouTuber. There's like a shadow on my face. I've referenced her on my channel before. I think she has a lot of really cool eyeshadow content. She creates really beautiful looks, and she just has a really distinct and unique style, which I really admire. And I remember learning about Shroud Cosmetics and their palettes from her, and I think it makes perfect sense for her to do a collaboration with this type of brand. I think they have very similar aesthetics and personal styles. I do have one palette from Shroud Cosmetics, the Creepy Cute palette. I love it. I'm wearing it on my eyes today. The orangey tones are from that palette. And there are other palettes from that brand that I'll talk about in a second that I also really want, but let's focus on the It's Freakin' Bats palette that Bean is coming out with. I looked at this palette and I immediately knew that I wanted it. I will definitely be pre-ordering this when it becomes available on October 4th. There is no shade in here that I already have in my collection, and there are actually quite a few shades in this palette that I have wanted for a long time, and the fact that she has it in this beautifully curated palette, it's just calling my name. These are not shades that I wear on a regular basis, but they are shades that I've wanted to start wearing for a long time. There are duochromes in there. There are really interesting and unique mattes in there. I think it's $35, and then you can use Bean's code to get an additional 10% off, so that makes it like around maybe $31 or $32, which I think is a great price for 9 shades, especially if they are the quality that I have seen from other Shroud Cosmetics eyeshadows in the past. I think it would also be a fantastic companion palette for the other palette from Shroud Cosmetics that is on my list, which is the Arcana Palette, and I have been lusting after this palette in particular for over a year. I remember talking about it in a video I did last like September, November, where I tried to recreate the shades from that palette within my collection, and I feel like I did a pretty decent job, but I still want the palette. I'll put up both palettes for you to see a side by side, but I think the greens from the It's Freakin' Bats palette will really bring out some of the green shades from the Arcana palette. The blues are the same way, the purples and the reds. I just think all of those shades would go so well together, and I think having them together I would be able to create some really interesting grungy, more jewel-toned looks, which is really what I'm craving lately. I just love how rich these shades are. I think you could create a very monochromatic, like you could create just a blue eyeshadow look or just a green eyeshadow look with one color being the main theme, but being able to create like a really unique version of it. And these just look so rich. If they're anything like the formula of the Shroud Cosmetics mattes that I own already, then I already know I'm gonna love it. I don't really go for like the newest palette releases. I try not to just purchase palettes right away before letting the hype die down and figuring out if it's something that I still want even after a couple months. But for this one, I know I want it, and I'm gonna get it as soon as I can. The next palette is from another indie brand. It's from Nomad Cosmetics, and it's the Orient Express palette. This eyeshadow palette is cruelty-free and vegan, and I just really like the packaging. I like the way they named the shades. I like the vintage vibe to it, and the color story is very unique and something that I wouldn't expect to see from like a traditionally vintage style makeup palette or vintage style makeup palettes that I've seen in the past. You have your really bright primary colors. You have that bright yellow, the bright true red, the bright blues, but you also have some gorgeous greens and bronzes and orangey shades and golds and greeny golds, and I love that each of the shades have like a little different imprint on them. Some of them are like a saxophone playing, some of them are a mustache, some are like a little perfume bottle or a martini glass. Nomad Cosmetics puts so much time and effort into each of their palettes. Usually they're based around a part of the world, a region, a country, a city, or, you know, some type of theme, and I do love a good theme. So yeah, this one's definitely on my wish list. It's not one that I feel like I need to run out and buy like the It's Freaking Bats palette, but this one is kind of like just always in the back of my mind. I'm really starting out strong with like the indie brand theme, but the next one is from Collab Cosmetics and is the Futurism 6 Lunar Lavender. And this is $24 for 6 shades, so it comes out to like $4 a shade, and I don't think that's too bad at all. And I just love this color scheme. I do really like purple eyeshadows, but these are different from the other purples that I have in my collection. They're a little bit more cool toned, a little bit more lavendery. Those two shimmer shades, that blue, especially the blue, is like catching my eye. I want it so bad, specifically for that blue. It looks like it has kind of like a blue-purple shift. I have had my eye on previous palettes from this brand before, specifically the one that had all of the olive greens in it, but then I purchased the Juicy Olive palette from Give Me Glow, and I decided that I didn't need both right now, and I kind of thought, oh, I'll wait for another color scheme to come out that will interest me, and this one is it. I think this one would be really nice to have in my collection. Still unique, but I think it would go well with some of the other palettes that I have. The next two palettes I want to talk about are based on recommendations from a YouTuber that I really admire. Her name is Sarah Hubler. I especially love her makeup drawer videos, her like everyday makeup drawer videos, and also her declutter videos, or even just when she goes through her collection. If you're a fan of like when people put their camera overhead and they just look at products and show swatches and play around and talk about the formulas and stuff, you would love her. She does really, really nicely done in-depth videos with a lot of research, does a lot of reviews, and she runs the gamut of drugstore all the way up to luxury brands. She's also cruelty-free, and I just think she has really nice content, and when she recommends products, I'm definitely much more likely to listen to her. So the first one I've heard her talk about and say really good things about the formula is the Jungle Lights Shadow Palette from Flower Beauty, and this is $19 for 6 shades. It used to be $17, I believe. I think they might have bumped the price up a little bit. I don't typically gravitate towards all shimmer palettes. I kind of like to have either an even mix of mattes and shimmers or more mattes than shimmer, but that's just a personal preference. But for this one, the formula is what sticks out. I'm told that it's very creamy, kind of like a Colourpop eyeshadow, but it's still a powder, super intense, super metallic, and I just think that this would help augment other eyeshadow looks that I create. And every single one of these shades are ones that are very wearable, in my opinion, for me personally, especially those golds and that beautiful green. The one that catches my eye is the one on the bottom right corner. It's kind of like a purpley cool toned mauve shade. In general, I've just always kind of had this eyeshadow palette in the back of my head, and maybe once Flower Beauty has like a big sale on their website, I'll most likely pick it up. The other brand that I've heard Sarah talk about a lot is the Sydney Grace formula. She does have a lot of videos specifically on Sydney Grace. A couple months ago she did one where she swatched all of her Sydney Grace shadows like by color category. That was really fun to watch. And a palette that she talks about a lot is the Enduring Love palette. It's currently sold out, and it's one of the reasons why I don't have it yet. I probably would have purchased it sooner if it had been available, but it seems like it goes in and out of stock very regularly. This is $52 for 15 shades. One thing that really calls to me is the very wearable colors, and that it does run a little bit more neutral to cool, which is what I prefer. It does have some like little pops of color like that plummy shade and that teal shade and that light pink, but overall these are very beautiful wearable shades, and I just hear such fantastic things about the formula. Some people say that this is like their favorite formula, especially their singles. They have really beautiful and unique shades. Sydney Grace is a brand that I would like to try more things from, and this palette is definitely where I want to start. I just hear such good things about it. I know Mel Thompson also recently came out with a palette from this brand, and that is something I would also consider picking it up. It's a little bit more colorful. Let me pull it up. It's also $52. It's also 15 shades. It's also sold out, but this one, it has much more interesting packaging, and it does have more like pastel-y shades, which I am a really big fan of. So now that I'm looking at it, I probably would want to get this one too. Anyway, whenever they come in stock, I'd like to pick them up, but for the amount of time that I've been tracking at least the Enduring Love palette, it doesn't seem like it's going to come back in stock anytime soon. The next two palettes I want to talk about have incredibly similar color schemes, and they are very similar to some palettes that I have already recently purchased, so I don't need them right now, but that doesn't stop me from thinking about them all the time and still wanting them. The first one is from Melt Cosmetics. It's the She's in Parties palette. I'm under the impression that Melt Cosmetics is taking shades from their stacks, their metal stacks, and turning them into standalone palettes. And I think She's in Parties was originally a stack, and now they have it in palette form. This one has a very mauvey burgundy color scheme, which I really love. I'm really into. I have wanted to try the Nomad Cosmetics formula for a while. I did want the Gemini palette for a long time, but I do have other olives in my collection, and so I don't need to purchase more. And so when I saw this palette, I was like, perfect. This is the formula that I want to try because I hear good things, but it's in a color story that I can get a lot more use out of. And it's so odd that in my head I can think, oh, I have enough olive greens, I have enough of that type of shade in my collection, but then I have 3 pinky palettes, 4 technically, in my collection, and I still crave more. I don't know where my brain is able to create that contradiction and feel fine. I think the reason I'm able to justify wanting to purchase more mauve palettes is because none of the palettes that I have that color story are like perfect palettes to me, and I still feel like there are some versions of that mauvey shade that I'm missing in my collection. And I think this palette and the next one that I'm going to talk about would really help me round out the types of mauve looks that I want to create. So this one has a really nice gamut. It has a really nice, beautiful, light, shimmery, mauvey purple shade, but then it does have a nicer version of deeper shimmer and matte shades within that color story, which is, I think, why I'm still so drawn to this palette, even though I do have other mauve palettes in my collection. And the next one is from Dose of Colors. It's the Marvelous Mattes palette. Once again, this one kind of runs the gamut. It has really light shades all the way up to dark shades, and I think this would be a really nice companion palette with the other mauves that I have in my collection. I also do like having more matte options than shimmer options in my collection in general, so adding 5 more quality mauve mattes to my collection is something that I'm still interested in doing. If anyone knows of like the ultimate mauve palette or even just really good mauve singles that they'd like to recommend to me, please let me know. I'm always on the hunt. The next eyeshadow palette I want to talk about is from Lethal Cosmetics, and it is their Build Your Own Palette promotion that they have, where you can choose the size of the palette that you want, and then you can choose which singles you want to go in there, and then they will send you the palette with all of the shades. And I do have a palette that I created myself. I'll have it up on the screen. If you can see, I really focused on blues and greens, just because I don't feel like I have a lot of that in my collection, but I would like to play with it more. I think one thing I lack in my makeup collection personally is different versions of matte shades. So I kind of want to build out that part of my eyeshadow collection. And then I do hear really good things about like their duochrome and shimmer formula, so I did want to pick up a couple of those as well. It's tough to get this palette because it seems like at least a couple of the shades that I want are always out of stock. So once I can get all of these in one palette at one time, then I will consider purchasing it. And I love that if you make your own palette, you can get a reduced price on all of the shades, which I think is a really cool deal. So would like to get this at some point. I just don't know when, because usually the shades that I want are out of stock. The next one I have, I don't fully understand why I want it so much, especially because it's a brand that I've never really had a lot of interest in, and that's BH Cosmetics. I do really like their eyeshadow brushes. I have multiple sets from that brand. I think they're really good. But other than that, there really isn't much from their makeup line that I've ever been interested in. But then I was watching somebody's eyeshadow palette collection video, and they showed the Hangin' in Hawaii palette. And this is 16 shades. It's very warm toned, and it's mostly pinks and browns and light golds. And for some reason, I see this and I'm really interested in it. And yes, I am wearing orange eyeshadow today, but in general, up until very recently, I wasn't super into getting warm tone palettes, and I'm still not. You can see from the palettes that I've talked about, they have a lot of jewel tones, neutral, cool tones. I'm not really one to get really crazy over really orangey or warm tone palettes in particular. So I don't know what it is about this specifically that draws my eye so much. I don't know if it's because of the season or because I just tried it out one day and really like how it looked, but I am getting more into orangey eyeshadows again. So yeah, this is, you know, such an affordable palette. You get 16 shades for $16, and I'm sure I could get it on sale on the Ulta website or the BH Cosmetics website and make it even more affordable. I just, for some reason, I'm really interested in this color story, and those light pinks I think are kind of kicking it up a notch for me. And the very last one is a Colourpop palette palette. It is the All That palette, and what really interests me about this is their variety of red tones, which I don't really own. I believe I only own one reddish eyeshadow. It's Red Ochre from the ABH Modern Renaissance palette, and I did wear that recently in an eyeshadow bingo, and I really love how that looked, and I think I would like to have more red options in my eyeshadow collection, and I think this palette would serve that purpose perfectly. It has scarlet reds, it has like deeper burgundy browns, it just has more options, and even has like a sparkly red in there, which I think would be really pretty. So yeah, I have my eye on this palette as well. I don't feel like the urgent need to get it like some of the other palettes that I've discussed, but once again, this is one that I'm just like always thinking of in the background, like, oh, I'd like to get that someday. So those are all of the palettes I had to talk about. I hope you enjoyed kind of just pining over beautiful things with me. Sometimes it's fun to just like sit and daydream. Once again, please go say hi to Yoa for me. I'll have all of her information in the description box. I'm excited to see what palettes she has in her wish list. But in the meantime, that's everything I have. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye, guys.